So welcome to Lunch and Learn. Parshat Behaalotecha. So much to talk about. Many times people talk about Aaron, the connection, the first Rashi on the Parsha, the connection of the Nesiim of last week, and Aaron being disappointed that he didn't get a chance to serve. In years gone by, we've talked about the importance of seeing the service of Hashem as something as will enrich our lives. I was in a meeting yesterday, 2 days ago in London, and somebody did me a favor, a very nice favor actually, a very, very nice favor. I was stressing because my daughter was on a plane and she was landing in Heathrow and I wasn't sure whether the car was going to be there. And the fellow said, no. And he went on his phone and he has an exclusive app for a very fancy car service. And he said, tell me what they want the driver to be waiting. And he sorted everything out for me. And I was so grateful, like really grateful. I even put a little cheeky sign for my daughter so when she lands, she sees it and she laughed and I got a picture and it was all very lovely. But I was like very heartfelt in my thanks afterwards. And he said to me, why are you thanking me? I love helping people. It's almost to the borderline selfish. You allowed me to indulge in my selfish. Let me do it. And I'm so happy you did it. And I can write it off as a business expense, whatever, right? People love to do. People who love to do explains the Mesilat Yesharim, that should be us and Hashem. We should love to do for Hashem. It should be seen in the way we come to shul, in the way we behave in shul, in the way we behave with others. And maybe we'll talk about this. Melamed Sheloshina, Rashi says about Aaron HaKohen, he never deviated. The same way the Bar Mitzvah boy puts his tefillin on day one, Aaron was doing it on day 1000. And that's something truly inspirational to think about. Can a person live life on a high? Can it be self-generated? The answer is yes. You see this from Rashi. How did Aaron do it? That's another question. I saw another beautiful pshat this year that I've never seen before. Melamed Sheloshina means, because the pasuk says, Vayas ken Aaron. Aaron did so. Well, of course he did. If he was instructed to light the menorah, of course he did so. What do you mean he did so? So I saw one pshat, Melamed Sheloshina. So the first pshat is that he didn't deviate. And he did it with this high-level enthusiasm all the time, which in and of itself is wonderfully inspirational and very, very beautiful thing for us to think about. But I saw something else. Melamed Sheloshina means shelo, that he didn't repeat. You could say l'shanot, to change, right? Shina can also mean to repeat, right? You have to deviate with the words a little bit, right? He didn't do it the same 2 days in a row. Every time he did it, he thought this is a new demonstration of my love for Hashem. And not only that, by the way, but lighting menorah, a few little candles, in a place that Chazal teach us where being light to the world, it's the most useless point, in terms of, I can't see that I'm doing anything. But to Aaron, that wasn't important. What was important is that I get to connect with Hashem. When we say Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, that's what it means. We become different beings with our connection to Hashem through service. And when we think about that, it's truly remarkable and wonderful. But I'm not talking about that this week, as you can clearly hear, right? Maybe we should talk about, for our international audience, Gibraltar's getting a deal, right? Gibraltar's been talking about forever and ever, is there going to be a deal? Schengen, the border, EU, passport, stamping, queues. There's a lot of politics you could go. Sorry? The Spanish, I didn't want to say it. Yeah, okay, the Spanish, right? There's a lot of politics here in Gibraltar. And yesterday it was announced that there's a deal, okay? The British foreign minister's here. And all of a sudden, Gibraltar Twitter explodes. I mean, I'm not personally a tweet man, but, everybody's talking and there's comments. And even on the community groups, everyone's chatting what's going to happen with this and what's going to happen with that. And in this week's parasha, we also see a bit of chat. We see that the people complain about the man. They have it pretty good and they talk. So maybe we'll talk about negative talk. This week in the news, Elon Musk and Donald Trump have the mother of all spats. Where's that going to end up? We could talk about that maybe. And then of course, one of the 6 things we have to remember every day is remember what Hashem did to Miriam in this week's parasha. When she spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu, when she said something which she did not mean to be negative, she said to somebody who loved him, and we're supposed to learn a kal vachomer from this. If already Miriam, who meant no harm and didn't try to speak bad, but she said a comment, and she gets punished like this, al achas kama v'kama, how about us? If we're really talking about other people, and I saw a beautiful Dvar Torah on this. Hashem says, don't speak. Why didn't you fear speaking Ba'avdi B'Moshe? Why didn't you fear speaking against Moshe, against my servant? Or the other way around. Ba'avdi against my servant, B'Moshe against Moshe. And the question is obvious. Rashi picks this up. Shouldn't it have just said against Moshe or against my servant? We'll know who you're talking about. What does it mean? So Rashi says over here, against my servant, Ba'avdi, even if he wasn't Moshe. And against Moshe, even if he wasn't my servant. So the Torah seems to make a distinction, a clear warning against slandering either Moshe, the servant, or Moses, the man. And the question we can ask, and perhaps explore just a little bit, is what's the difference? So I saw Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky tells the famous story of the Chafetz Chaim, the one we all know so well, right? And who was with another rabbi. They were traveling together in Poland. They were guests at an inn. They sit down to have a meal, and at the end of the meal, with some dignitaries at their table, the proprietress comes around and says, well, how was the food? And the Chafetz Chaim sings the praises, and the other rabbi said, absolutely amazing, thank you so much, delicious. Just point of order, you should know, this could have used a little bit more salt. And the Chafetz Chaim turned white. At the table, he said, my whole life, I've distanced myself from hearing negative speech. Why would you do that? Why do you have to say something negative? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he really blew up against this guy who was, against this fellow who was talking. And the rabbi said to him, all I said was the soup could have used a bit of salt. It's not, I wasn't as complimentary as you. That's not terrible. And the Chafetz Chaim said, no, you have to understand what's happening. There's definitely a chef in the kitchen. Probably somebody who was on a low income. Probably could even be a widow or somebody like that. And to even begin to remark that she didn't do a good enough job could mean that the proprietress has now gone to the back, is berating this woman. She could be in a real bad state right now. And he said, you're exaggerating. Of course, we know they entered the kitchen and they saw that was true. Okay? So, it was only afterwards, obviously, the rabbis, they intervened and they calmed down. They said, no, of course, it was fantastic. I just was there. And they kind of calmed it down. Right? The Chafetz Chaim, who was the great tzaddik who wrote the book, this is what he was telling us. He used to say, if you say the rabbi can't sing, or the chazan can't give a good shiur, that's Lashon Hara. But if you say the chazan can't sing, or the rabbi can't deliver a good shiur, that's murder. So Hashem is telling us over here, in this story that we have to remember about Lashon Hara and how we're supposed to deal with people, Hashem says, Madua lo yireitem ledaber ba'avdi b'Moshe. You should have been afraid to speak. I don't approve whether you speak about my servant in the capacity of a Moshe, or Moshe in the capacity of my servant, whether in the capacity of a rabbi or the capacity of a simple Moshe. Every Jew's got feelings, and it doesn't, whether they're considered servants of Hashem or regarded as just simple, I don't even like to say this, just simple people. You've got to be careful what you say about them. Say to them, say about them. The crime of Lashon Hara is an equal opportunity of wrongdoing. And that's why the Torah couches it in this very interesting phraseology. Right? And you can see also, by the way, I remember saying a story many years ago. V'tidaber Miriam v'Aaron b'Moshe. So the Yalkut Shimoni, I'll read for you. Writes as follows. Zacharta she'asa Hashem lekach leMiriam. And I kind of hinted to this a minute ago. Remember what Hashem did to Miriam. It's a commandment for you and I to remember every single day what God did to Miriam. Why? Says Behaalotecha dvarim kal v'chomer. Mar Miriam shelo dibra ela b'fanav shel Moshe, shelo b'fanav shel Moshe, I should say. Ulahana'ato shel Moshe. She didn't speak in front of Moshe. She only meant it for his benefit, etc. Kach na'ansha. This is how she's punished. Ha'medaber bignuto shel chaverim. Chavero b'rabim alachas kama v'kama. Somebody who genuinely wants to speak bad of others, and they do so on a public forum, how much more so is it terrible? And there was a Talmud of the Chafetz Chaim Replitnik, who was one of the rabbis in a big European city. I don't know exactly where it was, but he was up against it. He really had a difficult community. And in this community, the rabbi was fair game. Anybody who wanted to comment and anybody who wanted to criticize, rabbis don't have the easiest jobs at the best of times, right? You have to stand up and try and lead, and you must do so with love and inspiration. But there are times where you have to call people out. You have to say what's going on here is not acceptable. Maybe I shouldn't say this, I'm being recorded, but I had a recent interaction, shall I say, With somebody who really needs to do something lahalacha, it needs to get done, and not doing it impacts others. And I drew the short straw of the rabbis in town, and I had to go and approach this individual in a very tepid and timid fashion and say, please, listen, I know I don't want to pry or anything, but really for the good of everybody, please, you must. And you have an obligation here, halachically, you must do X, Y, Z. Leave me alone, who you are, you busybody. I got it in the face, right? And I recovered. Baruch Hashem, I'm still in therapy. I'm going to get better, guys. It's going to be okay, right? It's not an easy job. This Raplitnik, unfortunately, he had a nemesis. The guy who took him on the most was the president. And this guy rubbished the rabbi at every stage. And the poor rabbi was so soft and was so warm and was so loving, and he tried to help so many people. But he was definitely, he had his opposition from within, and it wasn't easy. And one day, there seemed to have been a massive shift, because this same aggressive fellow knocks on his door, and he says to him with tears in his eyes, Rabbi, please, I need your help. You have to help me, bro. And the rabbi, being the tzaddik that he was, welcomed him in, and he said, of course, come and see me with pleasure. Sit down, please. Let me give you a drink. As if everything was forgotten. And the rabbi listens to this man, and he properly is distraught, beyond distraught. And he explains to the rabbi that his daughter, the president's daughter, has just broken the news to him and his wife that she is going to marry a non-Jewish boy. And he said, this for me is the red line. I can't deal with this. Yes, I have modern views of the world and etc., but like Fiddler on the Roof, or maybe not like Fiddler on, this is the one thing we can't accept. Please speak to my daughter. Please. You are so well known as the one who can turn anybody's heart. This is the time for you to weave your magic. Please. And the rabbi, as if nothing had happened, said, with pleasure, I will do whatever I can. Send her in to see me. Let's make a meeting straight. And sooner than soon, the rabbi brought the girl in and spoke to her. And she happened to have been a very strong supporter of the rabbi. And she says, Rabbi, everything you say, I'm going to have to keep. And he says to her, but marrying a non-Jew, that's not acceptable. Please, it's terrible. She says, even though I have huge respect for you, but this, I'm afraid, Rabbi, I can't listen to you. She probably used love and everything. You know what happened? Maybe I can say it. You know what happened in some South American country? There was a very prominent family that had agreed to marry a non-Jewish. The boy was going to marry a non-Jewish girl. Now, and I'm not suggesting. I know this is being recorded and going out. I'm not suggesting this is Rabbi Tactic 101 in these kinds of tricky situations. But the rabbi was approached by the family and was actually asked for his blessing. And he said, that's going to be difficult for me. He said, but I do have some ideas, and I do think that the day of the wedding is an extremely important day. And, mikvah, etc. I understand, even though it's not really, going to go la halacha, but definitely the groom should see me on the morning of his wedding. Please, should come. And he did. And the groom showed up, and the rabbi sat him in his office, and he said, I'll be back. I just have to go and pick something up. Please wait for me. And the rabbi went out, disconnected the telephones, and locked the doors. And he left the guy in there for hours and hours and hours. And he was climbing the walls and banging the thingy. And 5 hours later, or maybe more, 5 hours after the scheduled wedding start, right? The rabbi opened the door. And he said, honestly, off you go. Sorry. And he, seething, looked at the rabbi. Again, I'm not suggesting this should be done, and this is not rabbi time. It takes some guts to do as a rabbi, but the outcome was remarkable. He raced to his prospective in-laws' house, a very wealthy family and a very prominent family in the community. And they had accepted him as a son, and they were excited he was going to marry into the family. On the contrary, it was very prestigious for them, etc. He knocked on the door, rang the bell, and he was standing there disheveled and crying and what have you. And the father-in-law came out and he said, I knew it. Only a filthy, disgusting Jew would have done this to me and my family. The anti-Semitism came out. So I'm not suggesting that that's the right thing to do. They ended up not marrying, and I don't know the end of the story of how that transpired. And again, I wouldn't advise rabbis to do this. But in this case, the rabbi spoke to this girl. Rabbi Plitnik, he spoke to the girl, and he tried his very hardest. And she said, even though I always would listen to you, this is true love, Rabbi. I can't. I have to do what my heart tells me, etc. Feelings trump everything, blah, blah, blah. And she left. And you should know the president came back to the rabbi and said, it's because I've been not nice to you. You didn't try your hardest. More complaints against the rabbi, can you imagine? And he came with criticisms of the rabbi. He says, listen, rabbi, everybody listens to you when you stand up and speak. Right? This time she didn't, it's your fault. So the rabbi said, let me tell you a story. And the Chafetz Chaim used to tell over the story. And he said that you should know there was once a traveling doctor going from city to city. And some bandits attacked him in the forest looking for his money and what have you. And they really roughed him up. They beat him up. They stole his money. And for some reason, they were rifling through his bags and they were getting their hands on anything of value. They're proper bandits, with faces covered, etc. And they took his bags when they were done with him and they dumped them in the river, and they threw him back to empty stuff and said, good luck, right? It wasn't long after that an epidemic swept through the towns. And as the doctor was journeying, there was a clinic set up for him in the town square, and he comes to the next town, and I think you might know this already. Standing first in line was the head of the bandits with his sick child. And he said, doctor, you have to help me. And the doctor said to him, I could have helped you. The trufot, the medication that was necessary for your children, for your child, was thrown away by a head bandit. And he said to this president, he said, you've spent your life rubbishing me, tearing down Torah values, not giving proper and ultimate respect to the places and the offices that need it. No wonder you have a child who is in the position that they are. Now look, there's no guarantees anytime, anywhere, any place when it comes to the education of children. But one thing we have to be, if only, we have to be consistent models of example. And we're being told over here in this week's Parsha that every word that we say matters. Don't speak against Ba'avdi or B'Moshe. Is it too cold? Ba'avdi or B'Moshe. Oh, very sweet. I wish, I hope, right? He said, Replitnik said, you can't behave like this. And the truth is, I was looking at this spat between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And I was thinking to myself, it soured very quickly. And yeah, it went very, and we're talking about two very powerful people, right? Maybe arguably one of the richest or the richest man in the world versus the most powerful man in the world. This is a heavyweight clash. And what exacerbated the situation, in my humble opinion, I think it's social media, right? The minute I think they may reconcile, I think it might calm down a little bit, but it got so crazy, so quickly, and so toxic so quickly, and I think there's a lesson in there for us. Really, I saw other rabbis writing. There's something for us to be told. Let me tell you about another spat in Jewish history, a very difficult one. I've mentioned it from this platform a few times. It's not an easy one to talk about, but I'll read you some basic points from it.
Musk has publicly apologized.
Has he? He's apologized?
Yeah, he's been apologizing.
Okay, so they may calm down, right? But how quickly it exploded can tell us quite a lot about social media. I mean, the minute Gibraltar announced that there was a deal, all the keyboard warriors were out. It was as if they were waiting for this. Ay que ver, what's going to happen? Boots on the ground. They love that word. Yes, Spanish boots on the ground, right? Yeah, I just picture like a bunch of boots just in the airport, right? Oh, if I'm going to have to walk past, it's almost like you can't win, in a sense, For years and years and years, people have been begging for a deal. Finally, there seems to be one. We don't even know the details of it, let's be honest. Nobody does, right? And everyone's already, my perfume is going to cost me more. Nobody knows. And I'm wondering if we can maybe take a bit of musar from this week's parasha. We're being taught to think carefully before we speak. That's really the golden rule over here. There's so many things to say. But who says them and how they're said is a very, very cautious, careful consideration for growing spiritually aware and spiritually growing Jews. We have to be careful. We do. I've said this before. I said it in my ladies' shir on Shabbat afternoon. Once or twice, rabbis are sometimes privy to some information that maybe the general populace is not. It can happen. It can happen once in a while, right? And I remember it happening once about a certain thing. I'm giving no details away, and don't bother asking me because I won't say anything. But there was a private, personal thing going on for a certain, we'll say family or group of people, and the peripheries of this situation manifested themselves in the community with one specific thing. And all of a sudden, people are on community chat saying, I wonder why this is happening. Oh, I know, I think I know. Actually, you don't. And if you would know even a smidgen of the information, A, you would be more sensitive, B, you would be much more discreet, and C, you would be much more apologetic. But of course, the information was very, very confidential. It was difficult and challenging and tragic. But we see the ends of it. And people can talk. I think a great mechanech was once in a playground and was asking his son, who was the menahel, tell me what you see. And he says, what do you mean, what do I see? I see Yankel standing there in the corner, Moshe's over there with his hands in his pocket, and his father said, no. Yankel's in the corner because somebody has said something to him today and intimidated him. So he's feeling lonely. He's isolated himself. He doesn't want more pain. He said, Moshe's over there with his hands in his pocket. I'm not pointing to any Moshe of any particular relevance, right? Moshe's there sitting with his hands in his pocket because his parents are poor and they don't have enough food to give him. So he's malnourished a little and he's cold. His hand in his pocket as he's feeling the cold more. And he went on, student after student after student. He said, that's what you have to be. As a Rebbe, that's what you need to be. You need to understand that every child has feelings and every child has a whole world that you might never get a window into. You may not look at somebody and judge them on what you see. That's the halachot of Lashon Hara. Why? The Chafetz Chaim used to say this. You're not allowed to judge other people. On the contrary, I've said this many times, and I say it again because I'm so passionate about it. Chafetz Chaim says, you know how judgment works in Shamayim? The neshama will come up to heaven, and Hashem will play you a scenario. It will be VR, it will be an absolute reality. And you'll see a bunch of people sitting in a synagogue or kids in a playground, and you'll see one person wrong someone else. You'll see it happen. And you're going to be asked to judge the situation. I don't know. I'll pick something weird. I don't know. A phone rings in shul, right? Maybe, yeah? No, some kids are mean in the playground. One person's going to say one thing to another in a supermarket. Whatever, right? That's what's going to happen. And you're going to be asked to judge the situation. And you should know, says the Chafetz Chaim, the people who judge harshly in life have it in their modus operandi. This is how they do it. I'm so glad you came. Baruch Hashem, right? But this is our modus operandi. And he said people who study in life and are creative in life at being positive in their thoughts of others, they'll come to Shamayim and they'll judge positively. And then Hashem will do a magic trick, will change the scenery, will change the settings, will leave the people there, will change the faces, and you'll realize the guy that did something wrong was you. And you are going to be rendering judgment on yourself. You're going to judge. So the Chafetz Chaim, spend your life judging people favorably. Be creative in the way you can judge people favorably. My kids have a joke, especially when we're driving in New York, right? Lots of people like to cut in the traffic, right? So my kid's joke is, maybe it's a husband driving his pregnant wife desperately to the hospital, right? Right? She's having a baby right now. And then when another car cuts in 30 seconds later, another pregnant woman, they say. And when it happens again, 2 minutes later, there's a lot of pregnant women on these roads, right? Yeah, it's a baby, right? But it's all around. It's sorry, exactly. They're going to, whatever it may be. But we've got to be, certainly, when it comes to our community, when it comes to our youth, definitely when it comes to our rabbis, our chachamim and our leaders, we have to say if they're rendering a judgment on something we don't understand or we might not have agreed with, that's their business. If you have a real question and a real concern, rabbis' doors are always open. Go talk, go ask, but don't get on Twitter. Don't get on the community chats. That's not for us. And what happened with Musk is such a good musar for us. In 10 seconds, all of a sudden it's crazy. And they're insulting really quickly. Worst deal ever, craziest thing. All of a sudden in Gibraltar, worst deal, crazy boots, something like that. Nobody knows. But you should know, there was a big spat in Jewish history between Rabbi Yaakov Emden and Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. I'm sure you know about this. We'll go through some of the details. I'll tell you one or two things about it. And we can learn quite a lot. It's a very controversial okay, fine. Here we go. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who's known as the Yavitz. Sorry, no. He was probably one of the greatest halachic decisors of his time, right? And his opinions are quoted the whole time today. But in 1728, I've got the sketchy details in front of me, he became rabbi of Emden, the German town from which he ultimately took his surname. And he tried very hard to preserve his independence and to speak freely. Maybe not a good thing to say in Gibraltar. For those that don't know, Gibraltar's got a Facebook group called Speak Freely, where people do, right? It's not a good thing. Yes, right? He resigned, by the way, after 4 years of being in that rabbi job. And he went back to his hometown of Altona, and he never took another rabbinic position again in his life. And very shortly after, he got permission from the King of Denmark to own a printing press. Very interesting, this, right? And he established it in his own home. And he published countless writings. That's what he did. Now, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, who lived at the same time, was a child prodigy. He was he became the head of the yeshiva of Prague. Listen to this, at 21 years old. At 21, he became the head of the yeshiva of Prague, right? And he was super well known for his brilliance. His oratory ability was amazing. He was absolutely, and ultimately became the chief rabbi of the three communities, Altona, Hamburg, and another one, Wandsbek, I think. And at that time, Rav Emden was dedicating a lot of his writings and a lot of his times to the growing movement, claiming that the recently deceased Shabtai Tzvi, don't forget this is the time period we're talking about, was the Messiah. Now he spent a long time debunking this Messiah Shabtai Tzvi myth, etc. And in the early 1750s, this is what really sparked a huge amount of controversy. In the early 1750s, there were kameot. How do you say a kamea? An amulet, right? You know what a kamea is, right? Kabbalistic, whatever. And they were prepared by Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, and they were presented to him with the claim that its author was secretly a Shabtai Tzvian, a Shabbatayan, I don't know what you want to call it, and he had embedded heretical messages within them. And Rav Emden examined them, and he concluded that that was indeed the case. The author of the amulets was a Shabtai Tzvi follower. A heretic, he has to be opposed, and Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz denied the allegations 100%, and he accused Rav Emden of misreading, misinterpreting the amulet, etc. And an enormous controversy erupted in Germany. Can you imagine two Torah giants at loggerheads arguing? Obviously, you and I know, Hashem Shamayim, without question, they're arguing over Torah, over its authority, over its direction. And we see this, and you should know, it caused a major split. The greatest rabbis of the generation arguing, right? Rabbi Yaakov Emden wrote and published relentlessly on this topic. Suspicions, leveling suspicions at Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, not only about following Shabtai Tzvi, about other stuff as well. Many letters, many pamphlets, etc. But I'll tell you something interesting. If you go to the cemetery of Altona today, you'll find that Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz and Rabbi Yaakov Emden are buried. They're almost neighbors. I think they're 3 or 4 stones apart, right? And they were adversaries in their lifetimes, but buried for eternity as neighbors and guests. And it's said, by the way, that before he passed away, members of the Chevra Kadisha saw Rav Yaakov Emden greeting his ancestors before he joined them in Shamayim. They got this vision of him, right, before he joined them in Olam Haba. And to the astonishment of the Chevra Kadisha, they saw, he continued, and he said, and Shalom Alecha, and I read you and I quote, the members of the Chevra Kadisha who saw it, they said, Shalom Alecha Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz. Sorry, he was, right? Yeah, I believe so. So the man who he had so vocally and vociferously opposed in his lifetime, Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz passed away earlier.
Yeah, that's why you'd say that.
Yes, yeah, right?
He was younger though, I thought.
I don't know.
No, I think I've read the story.
Yeah, could be, right? The man who he had viciously opposed his whole life, right? And 12 years earlier he had passed away, was now coming to greet him and welcome him into the next world. And when he learned about this, the Noida B'Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Landau, instructed the Chevra Kadisha. This is an amazing thing. Rabbi Cheskel Landau instructed the Chevra Kadisha to find the closest grave possible to the two who had made up and reconciled in Olam Haba, that they should lie forever side by side in this world. Now, the truth is the controversy has a very heartwarming end, and it definitely, while it raged, threatened to tear apart the Jewish people. But the conflict actually grew so intense that the emperor of Denmark and the king who controlled the relevant cities over there, he also got involved. At first he sided with Yaakov Emden and removed Rabbeinu Snevishitz from his position, but he later reversed himself. It was a big controversy and it lasted for lots and lots of years, right? And one of the points that are pointed out on this is if Rabbi Yaakov Emden didn't have a printing press at home, perhaps the harshness of the controversy would have been mitigated perhaps, or maybe avoided, I don't know. If he had to try and enlist the publisher, can you imagine every time he wanted to say something and it had to pass, an edit of what have you, it's likely that the whole story wouldn't have been the way it was. But each time Rabbi Yaakov Emden had a thought, he said it, right? Now, a Torah giant can do that. There's no question about it. But try and translate something like that into what's going on today, right? Today we have devices in our hands that rule the world. It rules the narrative. It controls the narrative. You only have to go so far as to see. I don't even want to mention her name, Greta, in our presence, right? She's. It's beyond us. Beyond us. Kidnapped. She was kidnapped. She goes on her phone and she says, "If you see this now, I'm being kidnapped." When's the last time a kidnap was treated so nicely with challah sandwiches and everything and put on an airplane and told, you want to know what kidnap means? Greta Thunberg, go into the tunnels in Gaza. Then you see what kidnap means. I don't need to go on. We don't need a definition of a genocide. I don't need it, and neither do you. But this is the buzzword. This is how Lashon Hara can perpetuate so easily. And it's like so simple. All you have to do is have a good marketing campaign. All you need to do is to have one video go viral. That's all you need. Maybe Musk and Trump could have done something, a little bit more cautious. Maybe they should have their own censorship in the sense that before they tweet something, maybe someone else should read it. Maybe not a yes man. And the truth is, this is huge advice for us as well. We live in a very divisive world. Jewish communities have loads of opinions. Jews are brilliant, they're amazing, they're spectacular, and they don't have to agree. They don't. But what we see from this week's parasha is they have to love. And they have to be sensitive in how they love. And if you have a disagreement, by all means have one. I remember once being, I wouldn't say attacked, but certainly in an email, it was close to it, right? Harshly rebuked, we shall say, okay? By somebody who took umbrage with something that I had said. Something, by the way, ironically, which they had heard secondhand. They weren't at the speech that I gave. They heard secondhand of something that I said, and they disagreed with it. And I was insulted multiple times in this write-up to me of, how dare I, am I trying to do this? I was accusations, massively false accusations. And when I got over my pain, it took me a while, right? I wrote back a very calm and nice email, and I said something on the lines of, listen, you are pick a profession. You're a tire changer, right? You're a car mechanic, right? I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to walk into your garage and tell you how to fix cars, because that's not my industry. I wouldn't do that. You're the expert. I said, nicely, last time I checked, I don't think you're a rabbi. I don't know if you want to question something I said as a rabbi from a pulpit, as a shiur, as a Torah spokesperson, and you don't like that? Don't tell me that I'm wrong. Don't insult me. Come and ask me for clarification. I won't insult you in your place of work, knowing nothing about what you do. If you'd like further clarification, let's not do this over email. Let's do it over coffee. Better yet, let's do lunch. Credit to this person. They said, absolutely. We had a fantastic, powwow that lasted, I think, somewhere in the region of 2 hours. It was by no means a straightforward conversation. But I'll tell you something. It ended in a hug, and to this day, we're firm friends. Firm friends. And I think this is something that maybe we need to take from this week's parasha. I was going to talk a little bit more about Hakarat HaTov, because you see the Jewish people complaining and grumbling against Hashem, against Moshe, against the man, etc. There's lots of things to talk about. And if we truly think about it, says the Chafetz Chaim, negative speech begins in its infancy in a negative thought. If you create more powerful positive thinking, negative speech moves away. It does. And if we are being warned anything, it's to remember what happened to Miriam, and we have to remember it daily. This week's parasha story, to try and urge us to speak more positively, to think more positively. And ultimately, if you go a little bit further and deeper into this, and you look at the Ramban and others, what we're really being asked to do is to find more appreciation. If you have Hakarat HaTov, if somebody once did something for you, you have to have Hakarat HaTov for the rest of your life. And the truth is, in a community, we've all benefited from each other. Some ways bigger than others. It doesn't matter. And I always feel grateful to this shiur. People say, no, without you, I don't have a shiur. It's beautiful. There's so much collective beauty that's going on there. That's really where our focus should be. Where the deal's going to end up, which people are on there, I am not so sure. There's very much value in all of that. God bless you all. We should see Be'ezrat Hashem, the return of the hostages. We be strong because Am Yisrael is chai. V'kayim, please God, everything should be well for all of us. Be'ezrat Hashem.